Headphones.
He starts going closer to it.
What about that? Eh? 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 Is that still gonna catch me if I'm over here? Ooh, we're gonna try. Well, at least one audio seems to be working, so we're gonna roll with it. I put my paint down somewhere. There we go. Okay. Today we're starting with a blank canvas. I have, this is a reclaimed canvas that I have painted black. You can still kind of see the pattern under it from whoever used it last. It's not what I'm painting though. They had like some birds and branches. Oh my gosh, I've destroyed everything. We're good. Okay. So, we're going to start painting. I want to do dragons. So this is going to be a dragon painting, and I am going to be doing it long ways. So probably starting with the tail up here, curling down to a head here. I'm going to try and go for a spiral pattern, and then with the wings being, well, maybe not central, but like a big piece of what we're looking at. And then we'll get to the background afterwards, because dragon. I don't know. First things first, we're painting in the gray, which to me today means that I am taking my dried black canvas and starting the first base layer of where I want things to go. So, let's start this thing. I will probably be doing little pieces of what the background will look like throughout this. Okay, good. And if anyone's just tuning in, this is a test stream, at least partially, because I've got new equipment that I need to figure out, and I haven't streamed art in a while. So that's what today's going to be. We're going to just be having a pretty chill time here. That's the vibe. I lit candles and everything just to have a one, chill time, and two, smell like something other than just paint the entire time. You know, because you can. So, we have a tail looping around. The tree might not actually be a bad idea to put back in, though not in the same direction, because this one, the old painting had it just kind of branches with a couple birds on it. I want a proper loop it around dragon. That's what this is going to be for me today. But to get there and to get that, I've also got to figure out exactly where that's going, and if I can get the grayscale done, that makes the entire coloring process later a lot easier. So, that is what we shall do today. Get a little bit of blocking in the basic shapes and areas. Some of it darker than others, some of it lighter than others, is the goal. And I really, really want to utilize this whole canvas because I like long canvases. I have some that are just like normal sized, but this one's like only about that wide. So this will be a fun one to play with. But it's also going to be one that I'm going to have to make sure that I'm double checking, standing back and rotating it, because eventually this is going to be landscape, but I want to actually work on the whole thing without just bonking into things on the side, because my table's in the middle of the room. I have a lovely studio. that is basically just doubles with my office space. I'm using my actual webcam right now. I have my computer on a fairly shiftable little table over there, so I can just move my monitor around where I need it. In another life, in another world, maybe I could figure out how to do this on my camera, but I have not figured out how to live stream that yet, and I haven't done the Googling to actually go look that up, because I am more familiar with OBS. Because I used to stream art on Twitch, as well as Minecraft, which I have still been doing somewhat. It's just been a lot, very on and off until recently. I've also done recordings of 7 Days to Die that I am still in the process of editing some of those. I might make some shorts for upcoming projects. We'll see how that goes. But other than that, dragons are some of my favorite creatures, which is part of why I enjoy this. Not just the painting part, but the figuring out the fun of anatomy, because dragons are kind of funky in that they are the six-limbed creatures. We don't have a ton of that in our world, and most of it is more close to the like 5 or 10 because starfish are menaces. We don't really have much in the way of six-limbed, fully formed skeletal creatures, so I've got to kind of play with what if Coelacanth, our closest ancestor, didn't lose 2 fins? Ha! And that's what we're going with whenever I build more dragon-like structures. It does mean that a lot of my dragons have a lot more in common with the Chinese long than they do with the European drake. It's cool though, because you gotta account for breathing room, and while they're big, if you account for breathing room and account for essentially you gotta make sure they have enough muscle space to actually wing. If you're gonna wing them, they've got to have the breastbone, so they've got to have at least a bit of a dip somewhere, but then kind of balancing that out with some aerodynamics and taking a look at creatures that are the like kind of sky ones. For example, if you look at bats, their fluff makes them very round, as well as birds whose feathers are part of what makes them aerodynamic despite their very heavy keel bone that their wings are attached to. So when you're playing with dragons, you also gotta keep that in mind, that they're most likely not going to be fully scaled, because even if you go back to the like closest that we had to ginormous winged creatures with pterodons, even they had fuzzy bodies from all the archaeology we've been looking at. So make sure you have something that can increase the aerodynamicity of your dragon, whether that's your scales are a little bit more evolved like hair, or whether you have... Yes, hello fluffy dragon crowd. Yes, fluffy dragons are perfectly valid. But it is interesting to look at some of the things like the long. The Chinese long has the like description of having very carp-like scales, and that's partially because of the whole jumping the waterfall thing for becoming a dragon. Gotta jump the waterfall gate from a carp. What is it? 1,000 years on the waterfall, you make it, you jump, you become a dragon. And so you still maintain some of that carp scaleness in their design, partially because of that. But I also like to think that that is honestly very similar to a lot of birds of prey, because if you look closely at a lot of birds of prey, they almost look like they have like a scaly thing if you're looking at their feathers. So most creatures that fly that we have evidence of have some form of covering that helps with aerodynamics. I tend to go on the almost more armadillo-esque side, where yes, they have scales, but they also have floof and some fat, because in the end, fat is one of the things that tends to be really helpful if you're having to go long distances, a larger creature, or even if you're going to go underwater, which a lot of lore has dragons in water incredibly interconnected. Honestly, the European fire drake is one of the only ones that doesn't have any connection to water for some reason. And that's partially because a lot of their lore comes from coal caves. Ah! My paintbrush! But when you're designing a dragon, you've got a few different things you gotta consider. You can obviously, if you just want to do what you want to do and just throw limbs anywhere, that is an option for pretty much anything. We've done that in human history throughout for many types of things that are draconic and draconic adjacent. I, for one, would probably end up making a 6-limbed chimera just to play with that, but I also, when I was younger, made a whole, I should publish that essay, a whole essay about how chimeras look an awful lot like buffalo and bison with their hump and horns and looking like they breathe fire. Have you ever seen a bison on a cold morning? Because them breathing and just steaming the air on a cold morning, it's spine-shiveringly cool. But other than that, it would be really fun to kind of play with those. How do you play with the limbs of having, yeah, it's part lion, it's part goat, it's got a snake tail. What does that look like? How does that eat? How does that function? I feel like Dungeon Meshi did a really good job in playing with those kinds of dynamics. Their Cockatrice had very much playing with the idea of a false head, which I really appreciated. And it was very funny to watch them go which part tastes like chicken. Dungeon Meshi in general is very entertaining to me, but that's also because I enjoy shows that go a not non-linear, but you're not going just for what works and what happens every time. You're actually trying to take a really interesting little side path and saying something. Like the comic in the manga itself, it's actually really interestingly kind of a consumerist warning when you look at it, because people are starving. The dungeon is a last chance method, and the idea that our heroes figure out essentially monster eating, and that they're not even quite the first ones, but it's such a taboo that it kind of leaves people in the dark starving when they don't have to, is kind of an interesting idea that those who are willing to approach the taboo have an upper hand, but then also have to reap some of the costs of that. It's fascinating. I like shows that play with the themes like that, where you're not 100% sure if any of this is going to work out for them, or whether they're going to be the only ones who things are working out for. Honestly, that was my initial appeal for the time I reincarnated as a slime, because the idea that, yeah, you accidentally reincarnated as what is often considered the lowest level monster in a lot of D&D-esque settings like that, where you've got a fantasy world, especially ones that are heavily based off of some of the Japanese ideals and ideas, where you're very much pulling in various Shintoism and Buddhist beliefs into how the core functionality of the world goes, and being able to have some of that is just fascinating to see where people draw their lines on where the taboo is versus drawing the lines on what isn't touchable. What is taboo? What is sacred? Where's the line? Which, to be fair, human storytelling has done this for ages. I think the most well-known versions of this are Coyote in American lore, Anansi in African lore, and Loki in European lores, as examples of tricksters who just constantly toe the line, and that's legitimately part of their function in storytelling, is where is the line of taboo and what happens if you mess with it too much. There's a reason Coyote dies so many times and has to wake up in the morning and go, ugh, ugh. I'm getting that Roadrunner anyway. honestly, I do say it's interesting to look through some of the old cartoons, both because their pacing is phenomenal. They actually play with your sense of expectations, which is a thing that I feel like only a few animations nowadays really play with, and a lot of them are independent ones on YouTube. But it's been really interesting to kind of... I went and took a look back at some of those old ones, like the classic, one of my favorite Bugs Bunny skits, where he has the opera singer and he becomes the conductor and just basically leads him to hold the note indefinitely until he practically passes out. It's a fascinating take, and the way that he plays it in that is really fun, because actually there's a Tumblr quote that I think said it best, that Bugs Bunny in a world left alone would not be a trickster, he would be a rabbit with sass, but when he is constantly messed with and put upon, he becomes a trickster who specifically gets at you through the bureaucracy that you shroud yourself in. Which I think is really cool, especially since that does also tie in with some of the East Coast Native American lores about hair. Which, whether Bugs Bunny is actually a rabbit or a hare, is a whole discussion I could have for days. Because mostly of his structure, he's built like a hare who can see God and speak backwards. I don't know if you've ever seen that meme, but hares are inherently more dangerous than rabbits, even though rabbits can be scary on their own. People who play with rabbits and say they're only fluffy have clearly never owned one, because they have claws. They have claws bigger than cats. So if you own a cat and are thinking, oh, I'll switch to a rabbit because I won't get scratched as much. Wrong! You will be scratched and bitten. More! With bigger teeth! I miss my rabbit, though. I had this cute little fluffy charcoal rabbit who was... I swear it was an attack dog in another life, because he would come up and grab the edge of your pants and literally like, and it wasn't like the terrier head shake, it was the like, ugh, I'm pulling you away, how dare you be in my space, kind of thing. He was a cutie pie. He was a depressed cutie pie. He had the habit of standing over his water bowl and staring into it for hours at a time sometimes, and I would just, like, with the door open, I might add you. This was not a rabbit who is like Zoocosis, I'm stuck inside forever and nothing is real. This is a rabbit who would just stare at his bowl, and there were days where I was like, are you staring at your reflection? Or are you trying to decide whether the water is where your face should be? I just don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he wasn't a attack dog in another life. Maybe he was like a mermaid and just wants to return to the water. Ah, well. Hopefully he got to be a mermaid again now. Cutie pie. Miss him, but gave me a lot of cool stories. Had a couple of rabbits growing up. Some that I babysat, some that were mine, some that were family pets. But that little guy cracks me up to this day. And while I don't miss him as much as my hamster, which is mostly because I had full reign over making sure my hamster was fed, watered, and in a cage that actually had like environmental stuff and a good wheel and multiple layers to run around in. I was very invested emotionally, financially, and financially for the time. I was still more of a kid. I didn't exactly have a job, but all of my spare cash and lemonade stand money, a lot of it went into that dang hamster. I miss him. But that's kind of the nature of pets, isn't it? Pets are one of those creatures that they'll forever be stamped upon the story of your life, even if they're only there for a little while. I think my shortest lived pet that I ever had was I had a cricket that I kept alive for 6 months that I found in my grandma's garage. Adorable little normal little wood cricket, and we just couldn't leave him in the garage because it was turning to winter. Where do I want the head? It's gonna be here, which means open mouth. Wah, general. Wah. Okay, there we go. But just the idea of having a cute little cricket guy, and not letting him freeze and starve in my grandma's garage was kind of the idea. So I made him a little terrarium area where he ran around and where he ate the food that he could, and he was already a somewhat older cricket, I think, but he lasted a while, and he was a cutie pie, and just one day I didn't see him. I put a little more food in, but I don't know. I've just kind of kept the terrarium because I'm not sure if he's hibernating or dead, but I just put in I used to just put in just a wee bit of food just to see. In the end, he didn't wake up in the spring, so I did end up taking portions of the dirt outside, and or maybe he escaped. I never did find his body. Who knows? Either way, sometimes you just gotta let things be how they be, and if something escapes, oops, and if something lives, huzzah, and if something does not live, then mourn it, thank them for their time, continue on, learning the lessons that you learned. That's what I like to take away from those who pass, from people to creatures to even plants. I remember my first dead plant. It was one of those, the sensitive plants where you touch the leaves and they go. It was a really cute little thing I had my first year of college. I kept it alive in my dorm room, not giving it nearly enough light. Not nearly. But it was funny. The moment I came home, it just no longer was happy. So whatever I had built up environmentally, just it didn't like the transition. So its leaves turned yellow and it just didn't quite make it, which is sad. And I'm still sad about that because I kept that adorable plant through my entire first year of college until the summer when I went home. And the transition just didn't go well. Poor thing. But it taught me a lot about plants and became one of the reasons that I have so many houseplants today. I have some snake plants, some aloe. I managed to keep alive a prayer plant, though that is probably the one that I killed the fastest, unfortunately. I had this little prayer plant cutting with like one root, and it did not. I kept it alive, and the leaves were doing okay for 4.5 months. But in the end, it yellowed up, and I couldn't figure out what nutrients it was lacking. I tried to give it some of the tropical fertilizer. There we go. Tried to give it some of the tropical fertilizer that I'd gotten to feed the snake plants, and got some of the little pothos, the like long growy dudes that are everywhere because they're dead simple to keep alive if you just keep an eyeball on them not going, because they don't need tons and tons of water. You basically water them once a week and they're fine. But yeah, I attribute a lot of that to my little sensitive plant that I had my first year of college. Continues to be a key reminder for me. Oh shoot, I made this longworm. Where are your wings gonna go, buddy? Actually, I do this. And that's turned around. That would mean that. Okay. I'm gonna make that a little bigger for the front legs to connect to. And then we're going to have this portion here. It's going to be where the wings go, so that I can have a nice separate combination of snake to give wings. There's your keel right there. Yes, this will be a chubby boa style dragon. This will be fun to do though. Okay, feathered wings or not feathered wings? Multiple wings. No legs, only wings. Front legs, no wings. Archaeopteryx style, lots of wings. A lot of options here. I want to have a set of wings here, which would mean they would connect about there. And to do that, there's a shoulder blade there. These legs have a shoulder blade here. Collarbone. Just gonna leave the snaky body. And set of wings here, which would amount to approximately, okay, let's go full Quetzalcoatlus style bird paradise wing. That should work. And then wing right here. Gonna go like that. Yeah, that'll functionally work. Fabulous. And then, the real question when you're doing feathered wings is whether or not you want to give them the little wing thumbs still, because while bats have them, most birds at this point do not have them after a certain age, though several, at least one. I'll say at least one, because I know there's at least one bird that has the wing thumbs when young so that they don't, like, fall out of the trees. So I really vary on which one, whether or not I give them nice big old thumbs. But if I'm doing a Quetzalcoatlus adjacent one, that's enough in the forest that you probably could, but since I'm doing a lot more snaky body, you also could very much not. I guess part of it comes down to, am I giving him tiny little T-Rex arms? Or am I going to make sure that all of his limbs have feathers? You know? Because if that's the case, that would also be a good example for the all bird, all snake, no lion. That's honestly a story that intrigues me, because the version we have of the Quetzalcoatlus story, based on other lores we have, feels like a modern. It's like 1200 BC as opposed to 0 BC, right? I mean, 1200 AD. ADE? What's the proper one now? But after 0, you got 1200 AD, and that's about the time that our current Quetzalcoatlus story is written. But the way that it's written, there's some interesting academic sources saying that it feels like, feels is the wrong word, that based on how the story is structured, it looks like they essentially retold a known myth and were trying to retell it to kind of unite a people, kind of like Homer in the Odyssey. A similar idea that it's a known story, but then told in a way that legitimizes the current rule. So we don't know if there are like elements that just never got written down because it was a oral history so well known that we're never going to lose that. Just like we're never going to lose where Punt is. Who knows where that island is? No one wrote it down. But it's fascinating to go back through some of those stories and be like, oh, okay, yeah. Art is inherently political. Whether you're talking about stories, whether you're talking about how people draw things down, because politics is about how humans relate to each other. It's not just about politicians doing stuff. It's about how do we communicate, what are we communicating, what are our biases, which is inherently human. Because you have a lived experience, I have a lived experience, and they don't match. Therefore, we have different biases. We're always gonna. But as long as we're listening to each other, we can at least come to an understanding about what our different biases are to each other and with each other. That's part of the fun of being alive and running around. See if I can get a little bit of the white off this part to show that it should be in shadow. I completely forgot to prep my palette knife for this. Where is that? I don't know. I'll figure it out later. But let's give this guy not just a little thing. Let's let him have grabby hands in the front. And then some nice Archaeopteryx feathers off of that. Whee! Or it's not quite a wing, but it's not quite a limb. That's not a wing. Yeah, that's gonna look fun. Some of that gray, a little bit more for the feather there. Make sure it's got enough length. Shape it a little bit. And secondary layer of feathers. Because even ostriches have some floof like that. And theirs are mostly for display and speed. If you look at an ostrich wings, they fan out. Great for displaying with their little whoo, whoo dances, but also help them turn at speed to whoo. It's actually kind of funny. That's something about antlers as well. Antlers have been shown to have a essentially quickening effect for when the deer wants to snap its head up or other creatures. Deer is the specific one I saw the study on. But I wouldn't be surprised if this applies to multiple things from horns to antlers. But essentially it showed that a deer feeding, so here we go. Here's the antlers. A deer feeding, nom 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 nom, zoop. When its head comes up, having the antlers actually makes that go faster because it's helped counterbalancing it a little bit there, which I think is very cool. But I also am an absolute ecology nerd, and learning new things about animal adaptations, coolest thing you can tell me. Second only to fungi adaptations. Why? Because fungi are little freaks, and I love them. They're hilarious. If you look at how fungi function in our world, they eat radiation and break up rock. They go and nom 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 up wood, which is an adaptation they had to come up with because no one could do that before the Carboniferous period. That's why we have coal mines. Entire bogs went completely uneaten because bacteria and fungi hadn't figured out how to digest cellulose. So imagine being in the Carboniferous period and there's just massive logs everywhere. There's peat floating everywhere. Nothing's being decayed, and boom! You have a higher oxygen content on top of that. Actually, that's a good question. Is the higher oxygen content because plants lived longer because there was nothing to eat them as much? Did bugs get so big both because of the oxygen content and because having crunchy mouthpieces is the only way to actually eat some of the plants of that time period? Because, I mean, some of the original horsetails are from that time period, but they were suckers that got like 6 feet tall with their little silicon fibers coming off of them. I love those freaky tubes. But let's get that there. Yeah, I don't know. That is blatant speculation on my part, but I think it's a cool pattern that would be really interesting if it played out in archaeology. I'll have to keep an eye out. See what happens. As for why I'm doing dragons and how I like to ecologically design them, because so many dragons are inherently linked to the magic system, whether that's in historical magic systems, fantasy magic systems, whichever magic system you're playing with, there's probably a dragon that is a part of that cycle. Because of that, and partially because of the inherent chimericness of most dragons, like you're throwing pieces together and going, that looks cool as all get out. Let's describe something. Like the original, let's call them the Roman dragons, Greek dragons, describing the huge pythons of the Northern Africa. Congo. There we go. The huge pythons of the Congo actually do describe them as ginormous snakes, but because of the area and visual interpretations changing, we got cool snaky boys who also have feathers and wings like the lindworm. Well, not feathers. He's got the bat wings and little scaly feet like a chicken. But that's the kind of dragon you had St. George slaying in many a Renaissance painting. Well, many a painting. Maybe not all just the Renaissance. They've also got some of those really cool prints where you can reprint St. George the dragon. It's Hunter. I actually have a really fun painting that I was trying to do the reverse, which is George the Hunter Slayer, which is a dragon who is taking out a knight. That is the plan, at least. It hasn't got armor yet, so it's just kind of a dragon with a spear through a chest. But, you know, progress works in mysterious ways. And by that, I mean you sit down and you work on something, and then it either goes the way you want it to and you finish it, or you have to remember to come back to it another day. And as long as you keep going, eventually you'll get back to it. Ah! Why are you trying to escape? Yeah, no, she's looking pretty good, actually. We got the feathers in, we got the wings in, we got that in. Should probably take a break and let that dry. I'm going to rinse off my brush. So, yeah, if anyone has any questions about dragons, I'm going to continue working on this guy on a later stream. I need to sit here and let it dry before I can work on it again. So, that will take 2 to 24 hours. We'll see how it goes. Where's my cleaning cloth? Later, y'all! La da da da!